I was gone 9 months. Snow, silence, and a rifle across my chest. Arctic duty sounds glamorous to kids with flags on their shirts, but truth is, your soul goes quiet out there. That morning, I drove 18 hours straight with nothing but bitter coffee, and when I hit the gravel of my own road, the first thing I saw was yellow tape. Not crime scene tape. Worse, bright plastic with the Homeowner Association logo strung like a noose across the entrance to my ranch. A green sign dangled from it. Community recreation space. No trespassing. I thought maybe I took the wrong turn. Maybe someone else lived here now. But then I saw it. The old mailbox I built with my father's hammer, still bent from the time a drunk teenager knocked it with his bumper. I killed the engine. Dust settled like judgment on the windshield. Then, a voice blasted from a speaker. "Step away from the gate. You are trespassing on private property. Authorities have been notified." I opened the door, boots crunching on gravel. There was a camera mounted on a pole now, and behind it a golf cart with a flashing orange light. In the driver's seat sat a woman in floral polyester, holding a walkie-talkie like it was a loaded weapon. "Sir," she said, with a voice soaked in sugar and venom, "you are in violation of community regulations. This area is under the jurisdiction of the Willow Heights Homeowner Association." I squinted. "This is my land." "Was," she said, with a smug tilt of her head. "You abandoned it. We've reclassified it as unused community space. Please leave before law enforcement arrives." I laughed, dry and low. "Ma'am, I've been deployed. I serve with the Federal Wilderness Program." Her eyes narrowed, but she didn't flinch. "That's irrelevant. This community has rights. You've been gone too long. We had to make decisions." That was the first time I felt it. A twist in the gut that something deeper had shifted while I was away. Not just paperwork or fences. This was a hijack. An SUV pulled up. Sheriff's star on the door. A younger deputy stepped out, glanced at me, then at the woman. He walked over slowly, posture wary. "You Michael Kerr?" Yeah." He handed me a folded sheet of paper. "Sir, the Homeowner Association filed for temporary occupancy during your absence. It's been processed by the county. You'll need to file a dispute if you want to contest it." I stared at the paper. The signature wasn't mine. The document claimed abandonment, cited some obscure clause I'd never heard of. And, at the bottom, Karen Fulbright, President, Willow Heights, HOA. That's how I met her. Karen, with her helmet hair and ice-pick smile. The kind of woman who thought a clipboard gave her divine right. I didn't speak, just turned around and walked back to my truck. She called after me. "Trespassing again will be considered a felony." I drove off. Not home, because apparently I didn't have one. Just down the road to Mel's old feed store, where the dust tasted like rust and old shame. Mel looked up from his paper. "Heard you were back." "Didn't expect to see you so soon." Neither did I. He nodded toward the coffee pot. "Still works." The mug burned my hands, but I held it like a lifeline. Mel didn't ask, just watched. He knew. Back when I left, I gave him a key, just in case. Guess it hadn't been enough. That night, I slept in the back of my truck, parked just far enough that they couldn't say I was violating anything. I watched the stars and thought about my father's voice saying, "Land's not just dirt, it's memory." Morning brought wind and the stink of scorched cedar. I walked the fence line. They'd already started digging, marking spots for benches, maybe a fountain, a community garden, they called it. I found a stake with pink ribbon driven into my father's old pecan tree. My stomach turned. I drove into town, went to the sheriff's office. Sheriff Taylor, man who used to fish with my dad, didn't even look me in the eye. I can't override it, Mike. They came in with papers. The board voted. County signed off. You weren't here. I was in service. I know, but legally, it's gray. Gray. That's what they called theft now. I walked out before I said something I'd regret. The sun beat down hard, like it wanted to see me crack. I didn't. But I wasn't far from it. Later that afternoon, I set up a tent at the far edge of the field. They hadn't touched that part yet. I planted the American flag right next to it. If they were going to take it, they'd have to take it from a man who still knew how to stand. 2 nights passed. Then someone torched my portable toilet. The fire spread fast, scorching the dry grass, licking toward the barn. I fought it with an old shovel and everything in me. My hands blistered, lungs seared. I saved the barn, barely. Next morning, fire chief rolled up. Orders were not to cross into the designated community development zone. Liability, they said. I looked at the ashes and didn't say a word. Just nodded. There wasn't anything left to say. I sat on the porch of my truck that night, staring at the line where green HOA tape met blackened earth. Somewhere beyond it, my house still stood, silent, watching, just like me. Funny thing is, when the fire reached the edge of that field, it didn't just burn grass. It burned through whatever thread was holding me back. Something cracked open inside me. And once it cracked, it didn't close. You spend your whole life thinking patience is a virtue. Then one day you realize they've been using your patience as permission. Next morning, I went to the back of the truck and pulled out my gear. Not weapons? Not yet. Just boots, gloves, the field map case I hadn't opened in years. I walked the land like I used to with Dad, years ago, before they invented subdivisions and solar-paneled gazebos. Back when land was land. The pecan tree looked worse by daylight, scarred from the fire, half its roots exposed by HOA surveyors. I ran my fingers along the bark. "I'm sorry," I said out loud. It wasn't just a tree. It was where we scattered Mom's ashes, where Dad used to sit with a book and a flask. Then I saw something, a flag marker, fresh. And, beside it, a small metal spike in the dirt. Not just any spike, GPS survey equipment, real expensive stuff. Someone was mapping the land. Not for benches, for development. That night I visited Jim. Jim was 82, sharp as a razor, mean as a snake. Used to be a geodetic surveyor for the feds, back in the days when lines on a map were carved with sweat and topography, not software. He opened the door with a shotgun in one hand and a flashlight in the other. "You're back," he said, like I owed him money. I told him what happened. He listened without blinking. When I mentioned the GPS spike, he grunted. You still got your clearance? Some of it. He walked into the back room and returned with an old federal folder, labeled in faded red. Overwatch Prairie, designated federal buffer zone. Access restricted. My breath caught. Mike, this is you, Mike. Your daddy fought tooth and nail to get that land wrapped into the federal conservation belt back in '83. It's part of a migratory corridor. Technically, it ain't just yours. It's protected. That night, I didn't sleep. Just sat with the folder in my lap, reading clause after clause, seeing my name, my father's name, the coded tags I'd used on service reports. I'd forgotten most of it, but the land hadn't. By sunrise, I knew what I had to do. I drove to the HOA office. The building used to be a grocery store. Now it had a fake stone facade and a smug receptionist who offered me water before telling me Karen was in a meeting. I'll wait, I said, sitting down. 20 minutes passed. Then 30. Finally, Karen emerged in a peach blazer and heels that clicked like threats. Her face dropped when she saw me, but only for a second. Mr. Kerr, you're not supposed to be here. I am. I brought something. I laid the folder on the counter. She opened it, flipped through, then laughed. You expect me to believe this dusty paperwork changes anything? I leaned in. You tried to claim land that's federally monitored. That's not a zoning issue. That's a federal breach. She froze. For the first time, I saw her mask slip. Not fear. Calculation. She was running scenarios. Then it came back. That smile. Still, you were absent. We acted in the community's interest. I walked out without a word. Back to the tent. Back to the barn. That evening, 2 men showed up in a pickup. Not HOA guys. Contractors. One of them carried a toolbox. The other had a tablet. I watched them from a distance. When they crossed the old drainage ditch, I stepped out. You boys got a permit? The one with the tablet frowned. We're just marking utility lines on federally protected land. He paused. We were told this was cleared. It ain't. You want to keep your license, you'll stop right now. They left. 2 hours later, Karen showed up. No security. Just her. In a car too clean for a ranch road. She got out and walked toward me like a lawyer approaching a witness. You're making this harder than it needs to be, she said. People are nervous. You sleeping out here with flags and fires. Maybe they think you're unstable. I stepped forward, close enough she had to tilt her head back. You want to call me unstable? Do it in front of the sheriff. Otherwise, turn your car around and stay off my land. She stared at me, then turned and left. That night, wind howled through the barn rafters. I stayed up cleaning the old rifle Dad left me. Not because I planned to use it, but because some nights you need to hold on to something that still means what it used to. I was halfway through oiling the chamber when the power cut. I stepped outside. The barn was dark, but across the field, the HOA's temporary floodlight, one they'd set up for safety, was also off. A blackout, or a message. I didn't sleep. Just sat in the dark. One hand on the rifle, the other on the old federal map. Waiting. At sunrise, I saw it. A bulldozer. It was parked 50 yards from my barn. Engine off. But fresh tracks showed it had been moved there during the night. On the blade, spray painted in red, This land is not yours. I took a picture. Then I took a breath. Whatever came next, I wasn't backing down. Third day back, and they'd already brought out heavy machinery. That bulldozer wasn't there to dig. It was there to intimidate. Parked like a challenge, angled toward my barn like it was waiting for a signal. Someone had to move it during the blackout. I stood there in the morning haze, boots in the damp grass, staring at that spray-painted threat. This land is not yours. It echoed in my head louder than it looked. You want to know something funny? When I was a kid, I carved my name into one of the cedar beams of that barn with a pocket knife. It's still there, faded and shallow, but real, just like my scars. I walked back to the barn, pulled out a pack of flag stakes, and started hammering them into the ground every 15 feet. Bright orange markers, federal boundary line. I knew damn well they wouldn't hold up in court just by standing there. But this wasn't about court. This was theater. And I needed a stage. By noon, another truck rolled up. White, unmarked tinted windows. 2 men in slacks stepped out. One had a briefcase. The other looked like he ironed his face every morning. "Mr. Kerr?" the briefcase asked. I didn't answer. We're here as representatives of the Willow Heights Development Committee. That's not a real agency. Perhaps not to you," he said, smiling like he rehearsed it. "We've been asked to offer a resolution, a financial one." He opened the briefcase. A stack of papers, and beneath it, a check, 6 figures. "Sign the parcel over to the HOA. No lawsuit, no headlines, just a clean transaction. Is this a bribe?" He shrugged. "It's an opportunity." I looked at the check. It had no name on it, just numbers. Then I looked back at the barn, the pecan tree, the blackened field, the ashes of the flag I'd planted. "No," I said, "but I'll make you a counteroffer. Leave, or I report a potential security breach on federally monitored land. See how long your committee lasts." The iron-faced man took a step forward. "You're making a mistake." I met his stare. "I've made bigger." They left. That night, I got a visit from someone I didn't expect. Sheriff Taylor. He parked far from the barn. Walked the rest of the way in silence. He looked older than I remembered. Shoulders sagged. Skin thinner. "I shouldn't be here," he said. "Then why are you?" "Us. Because I remember what this land meant to your father." He handed me a folded page. It was a copy of a land usage map from the 80s. Highlighted in red was the same stretch I'd staked that morning. You didn't get this from me," he said. "And, if they ask, we never spoke." I nodded. He left before the coffee finished brewing. I didn't sleep much. Again. Wind howled harder that night, and the stars felt farther away. I thought about my dad, the way he used to whistle while fixing fences, the way he said, "Land doesn't fight for you, son. You fight for it." At dawn, I walked the field again. The bulldozer was gone, but in its place was a pile of cinder blocks, and a signpost hammered into the ground. Future site, Willow Heights Community Pavilion. They weren't stopping. They were accelerating. By afternoon, I was at Mel's shop. He poured coffee like he was baptizing me. "You look like hell." Thanks." He leaned in. "You know they're planning a ribbon-cutting ceremony next week? Gonna turn it into a whole thing. balloons, press. That caught my ear. They invited the county board, even the congressman. Gonna pretend this was all part of some veterans' land reuse initiative. I nearly dropped the mug. They're using me? He nodded, grim. That's how they twist it. You were gone too long, and they're just making use of abandoned resources. I didn't speak, just walked out. Back at the barn, I opened the old federal folder again. Buried in the pages was a contact sheet. Old number, but worth a shot. I dialed. This is Kerr. Mike Kerr. I need to talk to someone about a conservation zone breach. The line clicked. Then another voice came through. Cold. Official. Describe the location. I did. There was a pause. Then, do not interfere further. We will dispatch a federal review team within 96 hours. 4 days. I had 4 days to hold the line, and they had 4 days to push me off it. The next morning, Karen showed up again, this time with a drone. It hovered above my barn like a mechanical vulture, humming and blinking. She stood by her car, arms folded. Just documenting progress, she said sweetly. I didn't answer. She added, You should pack up. Would be a shame if you got hurt during demolition. Amstal. Would be a shame if that drone fell into a restricted zone and got confiscated by federal review. I said, not smiling. She blinked, then left. I watched the sky until the drone vanished. Then I walked to the barn and started nailing boards across the doors, not to lock them out, to lock something in. You ever get the feeling that something's watching you? Not someone, but something? That morning, it wasn't just the drone. It was the wind, the trees, the barn itself. Like the land had turned its eyes on me, holding its breath, testing me. I spent the next hours sealing up every weak spot in the barn. Nailed beams across the lower windows. Sandbagged the threshold. Pulled down the old hay chute and jammed it shut with a crossbar from Dad's old cot. It wasn't paranoia. It was preparation, because I knew they'd come before the 96 hours were up. By noon, I spotted motion on the hill. A black SUV, windows up, idling just past the county line. Watching. Then it left. That wasn't surveillance. That was a check. A test balloon. Seeing if I'd fold, I didn't. Instead, I walked to the south end of the property and set up a secondary camp. Just a tent, a tarp, and an old radio tower antenna I'd salvaged from a storm years ago. I rigged it to broadcast a short-range signal, enough to scramble any drone frequency not cleared for military use. By evening, their drones stopped flying. Karen didn't come back, but someone else did, a young man. Maybe 30. Clean jeans, HOA badge clipped to his belt. He introduced himself as Scott, said he was here to talk. I offered him a folding chair and a warm bottle of water. He took both like they were unfamiliar tools. I didn't sign up for this, he said. I thought HOA stuff meant pool keys and lawn height. I said nothing. Achi, they told me you were squatting, that the place was abandoned. But you're not what I expected. What did you expect? He looked down. Some angry old guy with a shotgun. You're half right. He smiled, but it didn't last. They're planning something. Tonight. I'm not supposed to say that, but I think it'll get bad. I studied his face. Nervous, but not a liar. Maybe not brave either, but human. "What's your stake in this?" I asked. "My mother lives in the new section. She's sick. If I cross Karen, they'll fine her until she can't stay." But I thought maybe there's another way. There was, but not yet. He left without asking anything in return. Just said, "Be ready." That night, I barely blinked. At 2:14 a.m., I heard the first crack of movement. Tires over gravel. I killed all light sources. Watched from the barn's loft. 2 vehicles, pickup trucks, no markings, 4 men. Work gloves, bolt cutters. Flashlights taped to their heads. They moved quiet. Too quiet for amateurs. They started at the northern fence. Cut through the tape. Pulled down the flags. One walked with a folder in hand. Probably maps. This wasn't vandalism. This was reclamation. I waited until they reached the outer shed. Then I hit the floodlights. Blinding. Old halogen beams powered by the truck's battery. They stumbled, cursed. One dropped his flashlight. Another ran. I stepped out with the rifle slung across my shoulder, not raised. "You're trespassing on federally monitored land," I said, loud and slow. The one with the folder raised both hands. "We were told it was cleared." Wrong. They backed out. I didn't follow. But I filmed every second. Not for court. For insurance. For memory. So later, I wouldn't question whether I had imagined it all. By dawn, they were gone. But the fence was down. The flags trampled. The message was clear. They weren't just pushing. They were probing. Looking for soft spots. Midday, Mel showed up. First time he left his store in months. He brought a sandwich and a story. "Used to be a creek ran under this ridge," he said, "before they paved it. Your dad showed me where the runoff pipe went. Still there. Still works." I raised an eyebrow. "You planning something?" "Not yet. But I might." He nodded. "You'll need pressure. Not just fences. Pressure." I didn't know what that meant yet. But I would. That evening, I stood by the old pecan tree, laid my hand on the bark, closed my eyes. Dad used to say, "Fighting ain't always with fists. Sometimes you win by making them swing first." That night, I didn't touch the rifle. I wrote letters. One to the Federal Land Oversight Office. One to the Wildlife Corridor Commission. One to a name I hadn't spoken in years. Commander Rhodes. He owed me a favor. Next morning, the mail truck picked them up. At 10:17 a.m., I heard a chainsaw. Karen's crew was cutting down the pine trees along the western edge. She wasn't trying to take my house. She was trying to erase it. I ran, sprinted across the field, yelled, cursed, got in the way. They kept cutting. I reached the nearest worker, grabbed his arm. He shoved me back. You touch me again," he said. "I'll have you arrested." "For what?" Interfering with community improvement." Behind him, the tree groaned. Split. Fell. Crushed the old doghouse. The one Dad built. That was the moment something inside me changed. Not snapped, just settled. Cold, clear. I said nothing. Walked away, back to the barn, and started welding. Welding is like prayer. Focused heat, steady hands, the hiss of something becoming permanent. That day, I didn't weld hinges or fix gates. I welded steel plates across the interior of the barn, reinforcing the walls from the inside. One arc at a time, I turned that old building into a bunker. Not to fight from, to survive in. The old welder whined, throwing blue sparks in the dust. I worked until my back ached and my arms shook. Then I worked more. There was something ritualistic in it, like I was sealing grief into the walls. Every panel I installed shut out another piece of doubt. By sundown, I had welded the barn shut from the inside, save for one corner hatch and the loft exit. Anyone who wanted in would have to tear the whole thing down, and I'd be waiting. That night, I slept inside. First time since I got back. The air smelled of metal, smoke, and memory. The moonlight snuck in through the loft slats like cautious fingers. I laid on a cot, rifle nearby, listening to the coyotes, wondering which ones were real. Next morning, I woke to voices outside. Not angry, not official. Kids, 2 teenage boys, maybe 15, sitting on their bikes near the barn, whispering and laughing. One pointed at the flag I'd planted beside the field. I stepped out of the hatch slowly. You boys lost? They jumped. No, sir. We saw the trucks, the drones, everyone's talking. Thought maybe it was, a movie set or something. A movie set? Well, our mom said you were some kind of survivalist. That you had a fort? She said you were crazy. I looked at them. 2 curious kids on summer break, caught in adult crossfire. She also said you fought in wars. I did. Is this one of them? That stopped me. I knelt. No, but it might be the last battle I fight. And it's not about winning. It's about standing. They looked at each other, unsure. Then the taller one said, "If you need help, my dad's got shovels." I smiled. Not because I needed a shovel, but because that's the first kindness I'd been offered since I came home. They rode off. I watched until they disappeared. By midday, Karen returned. This time with backup. 5 HOA board members. Matching polo shirts. Clipboards. Laptops. Like a door-to-door army of smug. They didn't come to talk. They came to inspect. They spread across the edge of the property, taking photos, logging data, pointing at trees and flagpoles. Karen approached the barn, sunglasses hiding her eyes. This, she said, gesturing at the welds, is non-compliant construction. This, I said, is my barn. It will be removed. No, it won't. She laughed. Mr. Kerr, you're one man. We're a governing body. No. You're trespassers on federally protected land. And if you take one more step, I'll consider it sabotage. That hit. She blinked, then recovered. You're playing a dangerous game. So are you. She turned and walked off, her board behind her like ducklings. That night, the generator cut out. Someone had siphoned the fuel. I found the canister down the hill, still dripping. They were escalating. I lit a fire instead. Sat beside it with the old field map, rechecking boundaries. There was a spot on the west ridge I hadn't thought about in years. An old irrigation valve. Unused. Forgotten. Until now. Next morning, I hiked out before dawn. Found the valve under 6 inches of dirt and rust. Still intact. Still pressurized. I turned it. Slowly. Heard the hiss. Felt the vibrations. Water. Later that day, Karen's crew brought in a backhoe. Started digging near the barn. I let them. They didn't know they were within the runoff line. That night, the sky split open. Rain. Real Texas rain. Sheets of it. Thunder like cannon fire. I stood in the loft, staring at the crew's new trench. already filling with brown water. Then the valve blew. Old pressure lines burst underground, water surging up like a geyser. The trench collapsed. Equipment slid sideways. Mud poured across their new fence posts, swallowing them whole. I didn't smile, but I didn't cry either. I just whispered, "Land fights for itself sometimes." Morning came like a hungover ghost, wet, steaming, stunned. Karen showed up late, screaming, "You did this! You sabotaged! Eat. I turned on an irrigation valve that's legally mine. The rest was nature. She pointed at me, shaking. "This isn't over." "No, it's just getting started." She stormed off, leaving behind her soaked, defeated crew. I sat on the porch of the barn, rain still dripping from the eaves, and for the first time in weeks, I laughed. Not because it was funny, but because I was still here. The rain didn't just drench the land, it peeled back its skin. Mudslides revealed old pipes, concrete foundations from the 1950s, rusted bits of fencing no one remembered. My ranch was bleeding history through the cracks, like it wanted to remind me it had a memory longer than any board member's attention span. I spent the morning walking the flooded perimeter, flagging exposed lines and marking damaged ground. Every step was a squish of resistance. The barn had held, though. My welds didn't budge. The loft stayed dry. That mattered. Karen didn't show that day. Maybe licking her wounds, or planning something else. Mel came by with coffee and a box of old aerial photos. Found these behind the seed bags. Might be useful. They were more than useful. They were a map of time. One photo showed the pecan tree back in '74. Another, the barn under construction with my dad and Uncle Ray in the frame. But what caught my eye was the faint outline of a rectangular plot west of the field. A shape in the dirt. Fenced. Separate. "What's that?" I asked. Mel squinted. "Oh, that was the Salt Lick lot. Your grandfather leased it for wildlife monitoring back in the day. Part of the original buffer zone." I stared at the photo. The lot overlapped with the new fence line the HOA had installed. They'd fenced in federal buffer land. I made copies. That night, I updated the field map, overlaid the photos, and pinpointed the overlap. 2 acres. Enough to matter. Enough to act. The next morning, I left early. Took the long road out past the old mill. Drove 4 hours to a small, unmarked office in Austin. The kind that doesn't advertise. Inside, I met with someone named Lorraine. Gray hair, no nonsense. Worked in federal land compliance. I laid out the photos, the map, the flagged GPS logs from my own property walks. She didn't smile, but she didn't laugh me off either. "I'll flag this for review. If what you're saying is accurate, they've built inside a restricted easement. That's actionable." I asked, "Will that stop them?" She tapped her pen. "No, not until the field office confirms. Which takes time, but it adds pressure. And sometimes that's enough." Pressure. That word again. On the drive back, I thought about Scott, the young HOA guy who'd warned me before. I texted him. One line, "They're about to sink their own ship. Stay dry." He replied within minutes. "Something's up. Karen called an emergency session. Said it's go time." I got back to the ranch by dusk. Everything was too quiet. The kind of quiet that follows strategy. At 10:42 p.m., floodlights clicked on across the western field. Trucks, not one. 4, 2 backhoes, 1 cement mixer. They were building, in the dark, poured concrete in the rain-sogged earth. Laid a shallow foundation. markers all around. They were trying to establish use, physical presence. In real estate law, sometimes that's all it takes. By morning, a rectangle of foundation lay curing in the mud. Karen arrived in a white SUV, heels sinking into the wet grass. She climbed onto the new slab like it was a throne. Since this, she shouted at no one and everyone, is progress. The community deserves this space. No more delays. Neighbors stood on the edge of the field, uncertain. Some nodded. Others didn't. I stayed silent, just took photos. Later that afternoon, Scott met me by the north fence. Decent. They're submitting this as a completed initiative at the next county review. If it's accepted, your claim gets buried. Not if the foundation fails. He looked at me sideways. What are you planning? Nothing illegal. He smirked. But probably interesting. I nodded. You ever read up on soil hydraulics? Yours tarsh moraines. He laughed. No. I handed him a folder. You might want to. The next day, I reactivated the old Westline irrigation pipe. Not the same one that flooded the trench. A deeper one. Rusted and angry. I opened the valve slow. Let the ground drink. By sunset, the field looked the same, but the earth beneath that slab had become sponge cake. At 3 a.m., the foundation cracked. A sharp, echoing pop like a tree snapping in a storm. The weight shifted. One corner sank 6 inches. The slab listed like a drunk boat. By dawn, the site looked abandoned, tilted, unsafe. Karen showed up late, red-eyed and hoarse. She kicked a cinder block so hard her heel snapped. Then she saw me, standing on the hill with a coffee and a camera. You think this is funny? No, I think it's predictable. You sabotaged it. Prove it. She stormed off. I turned back to the barn. Inside, I pinned the cracked slab photo next to the others. The aerial maps. The old deeds. A timeline of a fight, one I was finally starting to win. The day after the foundation cracked, the weather turned cold. One of those rare, dry Texas mornings, where the air stings and every breath feels like a challenge. The barn creaked under its own memories, but I moved slow that morning. Not because I was tired, because I was thinking. They were losing ground. Literally. But Karen wouldn't quit. People like her didn't know how. They didn't understand retreat. They understood leverage, pressure, optics. She'd shift tactics. I just didn't know how until she showed her hand. Around noon, I spotted 2 black sedans at the far side of the property. Men in suits. They didn't come to the barn, didn't speak, just surveyed, took photos, then left. I called Scott. Oh, they're from the HOA's legal rep firm, he said. Karen's fast-tracking an injunction of trespass. She's flipping the script, saying you're the squatter. That's absurd. Doesn't matter, it's a delay tactic. If she files first and fast, it muddies everything. I looked out at the land. My land. The barn. The pecan tree. The soaked ruins of their half-built fantasy. Let her try, I said. That night, I finally got a call back from Commander Rhodes. His voice was gravel-soaked in bourbon. Mike Kerr. Haven't heard that name since Fairbanks. I need eyes on a buffer zone dispute. You think they'll escalate? They already did. He sighed. All right. Sending a field contact. No promises, but I'll log it. One more piece on the board. Next morning, a black Suburban parked at the south entrance. Government plates. Out stepped a woman in khakis and a navy jacket that read USFCP. United States Federal Conservation Program. She didn't introduce herself, just walked the property, snapped her own photos, then found me by the barn. You live here? I do. Documentation? I handed her the file. She flipped through with sharp fingers, stopping on the aerial photos, the flagged GPS logs, the note from Lorraine. She said. Not approval, not rejection, just a gear clicking. She nodded once. You'll hear from us. Then she left. Later that afternoon, Karen struck back. 2 county officers arrived with a notice. A formal claim had been filed declaring my presence disruptive to community development. I wasn't being arrested. Not yet. But I was ordered to vacate until review. The deputy looked uncomfortable. I don't agree with this, he muttered. But it's signed. I took the paper, read it slowly, then very carefully, I tore it in half. You can tell Karen I don't recognize her jurisdiction, and I'm not going anywhere. The younger deputy looked like he wanted to smile. He didn't. But he tipped his hat before they left. That night, I made a decision. No more waiting. If she wanted to escalate, I'd finish the climb. I took out the old military sat phone and made one last call to a name I hadn't said in 10 years. Eleanor Crane. She used to be a federal investigator. Now she consulted on property fraud, land misappropriation, and boundary law. We hadn't spoken since her brother died. We weren't close anymore. But I knew she still respected the uniform. When she answered, I told her everything. The land, the forged abandonment clause, the incursion, the sabotage. There was silence. Then she said, "Email me everything. Now I'll make a call." 2 days later, everything changed. Karen came back, this time in pearls and a stiff gray suit with 2 lawyers in tow. She marched to the barn, cameras rolling behind her. Local news. Her last weapon, narrative. She pointed at the barn. This man is occupying a communal space unlawfully. We're here to issue final notice. He must evacuate within 24 hours. I stepped into frame. No. One of the reporters moved closer. Sir, do you have comment? I pulled out the field map, the photographs, the federal designation, the signed statement from USFCP, overnighted to me just hours earlier. I'm not a squatter. I'm a custodian. This land is federally registered and conserved. Their construction is illegal. And this woman is standing on protected terrain. Karen's face didn't move, but her eyes did. The camera panned to her. The crew paused. She tried to speak. This is absurd. He has no right. Then a car pulled up. Eleanor stepped out. Gray coat, clipboard, federal seal. She handed the reporter a copy of her findings. The Homeowner Association of Willow Heights is in violation of multiple federal land use statutes. Effective immediately. All development is suspended, pending full investigation. Karen backed away. Eleanor looked at me once. You've got 48 hours to clear the area of anything you want untouched. After that, we bring in the feds. Karen hissed. This isn't over. No, I said. It's just beginning. That night, I walked the property line. One last time. Just me and the stars and the whisper of wind across wet grass. I didn't feel victorious, just clean, like the land had finally exhaled, and for the first time since I came back, I did too. The morning after Eleanor's intervention, the ranch felt different. Not safer, not quieter, just seen. Like the land finally had someone listening besides me. The kind of attention you wait years for, only to realize it doesn't fix anything. It just raises the stakes. By mid-morning, federal trucks had arrived. No sirens, no show, just quiet professionals with badges and clipboards, measuring, logging, mapping. They walked with purpose, eyes down, boots clean. Not one of them asked my opinion. They didn't need it. They already knew. Karen disappeared. Her name scrubbed from public meeting notes. The HOA website went offline. But I knew better than to think it was over. Power like hers doesn't vanish. It mutates. Sure enough, around noon, a letter arrived. Couriered. No return address. Inside, a proposal. Not from the HOA. From a private developer. Branded letterhead, digital signatures. They offered to relocate me. Buy out the remaining land rights. Relocate my operations to a similar-sized plot just outside the county. Even offered to move the barn. They called it a peace offering. I called it a final push. The envelope also contained a clause I hadn't expected. If I accepted, all investigations would cease voluntarily. That's when I understood. Karen had moved her leverage elsewhere. Offloaded the liability to a shell company. Pivoted from HOA president to behind-the-curtain operator. She wanted to buy silence. I burned the letter. That night, I sat by the barn and thought about what I'd give up if I left. Not just soil, not just walls and memories, but proof that a man could come home and not be erased. At sunrise, I met the federal team leader. His name was Grant. Straight-spined, middle-aged, unreadable. He said, "We've confirmed encroachment into federal buffer zones. The development will be rolled back." I nodded. "But?" He hesitated. "It's going to take time. And during that time, the pressure will mount. Off the books. Quiet. Legal, but cruel." I laughed without humor. "So nothing's changed." It has. You're not alone anymore. But don't expect a parade. I didn't. I expected a siege. That same day, I got another visitor. Not Karen. Not HOA. A man in boots and a jacket that didn't quite fit. Walked like a veteran. Spoke like a lawyer. Mr. Kerr?" I nodded. He handed me a file. "I'm with a veterans legal fund. We've been tracking land disputes like this. A colleague saw your case. We want to help." I flipped through the file. Similar cases. Ranchers, retirees, deployed service members. Most lost. A few settled. None won outright. "Why me?" Because you're still standing." He left me with a burner phone and his card. "You decide when to call." I didn't call. Not yet. Instead, I spent the afternoon gathering everything I hadn't touched in years. Dad's land deeds. The old Army commendations. Letters from the Wildlife Council. I laid them out in the barn like a mosaic. It wasn't evidence. It was a legacy. That night, a truck drove by slow. No lights, no plates. I watched it from the loft, one hand on the rifle, the other on a photo of my mother sitting under the pecan tree with a lemonade jar. She used to say, "Roots are stronger than storms." I hoped she was right. I'm sure, but... The next day brought noise. Not from Karen. From within. A neighbor, Linda Shaw, hadn't spoken to me since I got back. She stood at the edge of the field with arms folded. I saw the news, she said. I nodded. You should have warned us. Warned you about what? She gestured at the land. That it wasn't just yours. That it was part of something bigger. I took a breath. I didn't know myself until I had to fight for it. She didn't look satisfied. People are scared. HOA's pulling out, but what fills the void? Who decides what happens next? That caught me. I hadn't thought about what came after. I asked, "What do you want to happen?" She hesitated. Something fair. That night, I walked the fence line again, and I started to wonder if the final fight wasn't about keeping the land, but about deciding who would shape it, and whether I had the strength to lead or just to defend. In the barn, I opened the old ledger, the one my father used to track crop rotations and repairs. On the last page, in faded ink, he'd written, "And if they ever come for it, remember, this land isn't just ours. It's who we become protecting it." I closed the book and finally understood what had to happen next. The final storm didn't come with thunder or rain. It came with silence. 2 weeks passed. The federal team wrapped up their survey. The cracked foundation was demolished. The fence lines removed. What remained was earth, scarred, soaked, but breathing again. Karen was nowhere to be seen. Rumor had it she left town. Maybe true. Maybe not. But her name still echoed in every cautious look from the neighbors. For the first time in months, the barn stood quiet, and I didn't know what to do until a knock came. It was Scott. Same clipboard, but no badge this time. Just jeans and a windbreaker. They dissolved the HOA, he said. Technically, but that just means it's splintered. People want order, but no one wants to lead. I looked past him. To the kids riding bikes. To Linda trimming her fence line. To the couple down the road building a chicken coop on land that wasn't theirs a month ago. You came for something, I said. He nodded. They want you to speak. Not officially, just say something. Friday, the old town hall. I'm not a politician. You're the only one that didn't fold. That night, I stared at the mirror in the barn. Saw a face older than I remembered. The beard more salt than pepper. Eyes tired, but not dim. And I heard Dad's voice again. Land doesn't just need a defender. It needs a steward. Friday came. I wore my cleanest shirt, didn't shave, didn't dress it up. I walked into the old hall like I was walking into a storm. Head high, boots loud. They were all there, dozens of them. Some I knew. Most I didn't. The air was tense, not hostile, just waiting. I didn't stand behind a podium. Just in front, hands open. You know who I am, I said. And if you don't, that's fine. I didn't come here to win anything. A murmur rippled through. I came here because for the last few months, I fought a war I didn't start. I fought for land that shouldn't have needed defending. But more than that, I fought to be seen, to be counted, to be heard. A few nods, a silence deeper than doubt. I was gone. And when I came back, my home was gone too. Not the building, not the soil, the belonging. And I think some of you feel the same. I paused. Let it hang. We can fight each other, or we can fight for something. Together, not HOA, not bureaucracy, just neighbors. Agreements built with handshakes and fences built with respect. Linda raised her hand. Who decides the rules? I looked around. You do. We all do. But we start with truth and with land that can't be sold from under us just because someone wasn't home that night. I walked back to the ranch under a sky so clear it hurt. The air was still. The kind of still that means something ended, and something else began. 2 weeks later, we held the first gathering. Not a board. A circle. Folding chairs under the pecan tree. No titles. No agenda. Just a start. Scott brought coffee. Linda brought pie. I brought the map. And together, we redrew the lines. Not just on paper, but in trust. In the weeks that followed, more came. We built a shared storage shed, marked walking trails that respected buffer zones, created a calendar for water use. No one signed anything, but everyone showed up. The land changed, grew softer, grew real again. And I did too. Last week, I got a letter. Not from the government. From a boy who rode past the barn on his bike that first week. He said, Mr. Kerr, I want to build a treehouse. Can I use the big tree? I wrote back, as long as you take care of it, and that's the truth of it. This story didn't end with a verdict or a victory. It ended with a hand reaching out, and another hand choosing not to strike. Sometimes the biggest win isn't reclaiming land. It's restoring the kind of place worth belonging to. And I'm still here, just where I was meant to be.